I've incorporated the I'll quit method into my bread making the last 4 times. My biggest struggle was knowing when bulk fermentation was done. This method has made such a big difference for me. I'll take you through start to finish on how to bake a sourdough loaf. I start with 150 grams of active sourdough, 250 grams of filtered water. Mix that up and then let it sit for around 5 minutes. Then I add 500 grams of unbleached bread flour. Mix that up really good. And I also do add more water as I'm mixing at this point to get it the texture that I want it. This next step is just a personal choice of mine. I feel that if I let this dough sit for 30 minutes before adding the salt, it gets a better rise and it just does better overall. So then I fold in 10 grams of salt. And then I do take the temperature just to get a baseline of how long it's going to take this to rise. Use this chart from the sourdough journey just so I have a time frame for when I need to start looking at the dough. Once all the ingredients have been mixed together for at least an hour, that is when I do the I'll quit method. So basically during my first stretch and fold, I take 40 grams of the dough and put it into a 2-ounce container. Push that down and then put the lid back on. Once the dough reaches the top, you have reached a 30% rise in your dough. You will need to keep this with your other dough just so it's around the same temperature. I complete 4 rounds of stretch and folds, just removing the container, and then once I'm done, putting the container right back on top. Once I reach the time, going by that time chart, I start looking for signs that bulk fermentation is complete. See, it's jiggly, there's bubbles, and if I look at the container, you can see that it's reached the top. The dough also pulls easily away from the bowl. So then I dump out the dough on the counter, add the 40 grams that was in the little 2-ounce container, shape for the first time, let that sit for around 20 minutes, and then shape again. I use one of these little Banneton baskets, so I just put it in there, and then I let it sit in the fridge overnight and let it cold proof. The next morning, I preheat my oven to 450. Score my dough and then bake at 450 in a Dutch oven with the lid on for 30 minutes. Then I remove the lid and bake for an additional 20 minutes. I know that this was a lot of information, so if you have any questions, please ask, and I will tag the original person who shared this I'll quit method.